G'day and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to go over this rifle. Well, actually what we're talking about is another cartridge in the 7mm. The one at the top here, the 7mm rum. I'll get into those at the moment. Those are the ones we're sort of doing in this ELR series in the 7mm range, I suppose is what we've done, I should say. And that's for the upcoming season. I'll go through the rifle briefly for you so you got an idea of what you're looking at. It is a rifle you first saw in the 300 PRC. It has this GCPD chassis, which has performed really well, done all the things we wanted to do, worked really, really nicely. A Remington 700 Trude action. It's actually had a little bit more work done to it now. We've actually gone through and done the Seiko style extractor. I think it's a M16, or it's a different style extractor they put in there, but it's been modified as to make it extract better, and just another bit of work you can do to a Remington 700 action. With a Trigger Tech trigger, it's running one of my bag riders on it. My bipod system, Gareth set it up so it could take my bipod system with the front spigot. And then a new muzzle brake I'll get to in a little minute. But the real reason I'm actually doing this rifle in 7mm, I'd gone to the 28 Muzzle and thought that's as far as I needed to go on the 7mm. We were nearly touching on the 3,200 feet per second out of 195 grain projectile, so it was doing really well. I was going to leave it there. But we had some barrels sent across from a company, Sassen Barrels in the UK. Did a little bit of show and tell with them. They sent across some to us to have a play with. We have set one up. That's what the 338 Win Mag was set up in. Performed really well, really happy with it, worked really nicely. But I had another 7mm barrel sitting there. There's a couple of others I sent across to try when it suited us. And I decided, listen, that was a good one to do. I should do another 7mm, and stopped and thought about what I could do, which I came up with the 7mm rum. So the Remington Ultra Magnum. A round that was put together, it's a rum. So for people who don't realise, the Remington Ultra Magnums, the majority of them are exactly the same profiles in the case. I think the 338 rum's a little shorter, but the rest of them, which I think is a 6.5, there's a 270, there's a 7mm, there's a 30, the 30 cal rum, and I think there's something else as well. But they're all the same size case or same shape, and the shoulder angle and all that sort of stuff, with just simply different size neckings on them. So I've done the 300 rum, worked really well. I thought, listen, let's go and do the, actually the 300 rum was done in this rifle you're looking at right here, after we did the 300 PRC. So let's do the 7mm and in the Sassen barrel. And just recently after that, I found, or I read, I haven't had any contact from the guys, is that the company has gone into liquidation. So I think one of the things of the changing times of the world, I would presume COVID, that sort of stuff in the UK, I know there's lots of horrible shutdowns and things happened over there, so I suspect that's all what it's attached to. But listen, not something I have any knowledge about in truth. I just have read that the company is gone. So it's a little bit more of a tribute to. It's not something you can go and purchase in any fashion I know of, at least, but it still is a barrel, of a very well made barrel that we have gone through and chambered up in this, and I've started the testing with it. So that's a little bit of that story there, a little bit of a side note, I suppose. But that's the reason why I went and found this cartridge to go and do, because I was looking for one I could do beyond, in either sense, of what I've done here. And what I have done in the 7mm stuff, we have the 7mm 08, which is, listen, performing super well. All of them are running. I used to run in the 7mm Rem Mag, which I've had for many years now. I used to run the 180 grain projectile. Then I stepped that up to the 195s in the Extreme Outer Limit Burger projectile, which performed really well, really happy with it. And then now they've gone to the 190s, which are probably a little tiny bit more performance, same BC, slightly less weight, so a little more speed. At the moment, I've done the 28 Nosler and now this in the 195s. I've got a few of the 195s. They perform really well, really good projectile. And to start off, at least, I don't want to run the maximum speed. I feel a little bit slower is probably a little bit better. Not that that makes much sense when you find out what speed I'm actually running. Anyway, that's that's why the barrel is, that's what we're up to, and those are them. This is 7mm 08. This is the 7mm WSM, which is once again another, well, it's just a heavy hitter in the way of precision and low recoil and reach out there sort of stuff. Really, really good round, the 7mm WSM. The 7mm Rem Mag I've used for many, many years. Once again, awesome round, really like it. You know, you could say arguably hold its ground against any of these sort of things. It is in the middle of the range of what we're talking about. The 28 Nosler, which is one when I was looking at going through whether it was a 7mm 300 PRC, the 7mm 300 Win Mag, so the 7mm practical, or what I could step up to. Which I suppose I considered the rum a little tiny bit there, but felt the 28 Nosler was sort of in the middle of that gang, or it was probably the top of that gang just below the rum, and should perform really well the way it's designed, what Nosler did, that sort of stuff. Though that's what I did. I found I was getting just under the 3,200 feet per second. I could get a little over 3,200, but just under the 3,200 feet per second out of the 195 gram projectile was where it was sort of its happy spot and was super performing, super fast. Super efficient round at that level, very accurate, nice to shoot, all the rest of it. And now I've only just started with this 7mm rum. A little bit of a weird story to go with the chambering of this one, but where I've ended up with, it looks like it's going to be in the high 3,200, so 3,250 to 3,300. It could go further. I think you'll probably push it up into the ragged edge of the 3,400 feet per second out of 195 gram projectile, but looks like it's going to be comfy in the high 3,200s, 3,300 neck of the woods. So, and my load development is not really a load development. I just simply find pressure and speed. So I start at X amount of powder, and with this sort of thing, go up 2 grain, 2 grain, 2 grain. I've only tested the 2218, which is the same as the 50 BMG, I think, in the Hodgins, but that's where I've run. So running a reasonable amount of powder, we've got to the point where I don't give specific loads whatsoever, but we're over 100 grains of that powder in this cartridge, and we're seeing those sorts of speeds. The curious bit about this round is that I set up to where I wanted 102 millimeters of overall length. That's just the tip of the projectile in the way of measuring it to set it up to when he chambered the round. That's what I wanted to see out of that, which is going to give me the bullet sitting in the right place in the case and everything nice and neat and tidy. And normally what we do is they get the ream, run the ream into the barrel, then measure it, see where that projectile sits, and then move it forward. Then just run a throat reamer forward to push it forward to get where I wanted. The ream that we got, which we found, he didn't have one. We found one on the other side of the country. It was an older style ream, but still nice and sharp and all that sort of stuff. So pushed it forward. When he measured it where it was 106 millimeters. So 4 millimeters further forward, which is the 160 thou further forward than where I wanted it to be. But that's fine. I've then set it up to where I'm still, to make it all work, I'm running around about the 100 thou of jump. I think it's 90 thou of jump is what I've got to run the projectiles where they're still into the case enough to where we've got the proper bearing surface hookup and that sort of thing. And then I generally find that you're just not on compression, but you need a very full case to get the best consistency and all the rest of it. And so the slow powder, all that combination comes together where we've got very good speed, not too much pressure, and it still all works as a round. Not as far forward as I would have gone. Oh, sorry, it is further forward than I would have gone by choice, but that's the interesting story that comes with this one, and that's why it looks like it does there with that projectile all the way out there. Just how that ream was set up. Don't know the rest of the details, but not worried about the rest of the details, working nicely, so we won't overthink that one. I should say in the other bits of how I do this sort of thing, like I said, I will set up just 5 rounds and go out and test them, look at the pressures. In this case, because I don't have any data for something set up like this, it took me a couple of times. I went out with 5, okay, saw stuff, okay. I then went out with 5 more to go a little further and test myself properly. And that's where I come back with what I've got. So I then end up with 3 to see how stable it was. I'm using, where I used to use the lab radar, and I probably still were in places, I was using the bullet seeker. And for those people who don't know what I'm looking at, this is actually a little chronograph that you use through your iPhone or through your device, where it hooks up with Bluetooth and then it reads. It needs to be, I'm hearing some people who are having some problems with these. They get them and they have some issues in how they use them. I'm not sure. The company has gone through and done an update with the system, so there is, I think, some stuff that's been replaced and upgraded. I haven't had any problems with them at all. For this sort of test, you can clip them to the rails if you got that sort of stuff. You can set up on a separate bipod, all that type of thing. When I do this sort of testing, I'll go generally with no scope on, and I'm just going to shoot the rifle from my shoulder or from my hip, essentially, for my first one to test it. It's away from me, that type of thing. So into a safe berm where a good 200 meters away, so all the stuff can read properly and do that type of thing, but it's into the side of the hill, so it's nice and safe in that level. And for this sort of thing, for that sort of thing on this one, I found how I used it to make it work really simply. They've got this little, whoop, let me put that on properly. For the Picatinny rail unit here, they got this little adapter. I put a little bit of a double-sided tape in there just to make it a bit stickier, and I just sat it on the barrel like that, and then ran a couple of lucky bands straight around the whole thing. I won't try and put it on now in front of the camera, but just sat it on like that and worked faultlessly. Yes, probably mess with harmonics and things if you're trying to do it at the range, so I wouldn't do it for group shooting, but that was simply to find my speed. For group shooting, that sort of stuff, whether I mount it on, I take it off here and put it on a little tripod, which is pointing exactly with the barrel. I did find the one comment I would say is I was keeping it very close to the barrel. You don't use it out here, not using it a long way, not using it to where it has to see through the muzzle blast. I make sure I keep it very close to the barrel, because the way this system triggers is it triggers by seeing. It sees that projectile travel, so it needs to see it very early on. If it's out too far, I think there's going to be some issues with seeing, is what I would say. There is a parabolic lens, I think, or a bit that they clip on the front, which I think will make it more flexible to be true, and I'll test that. What I've simply found, the couple of times I haven't seen a reading is when I haven't been pointing it straight enough or it hasn't been close enough. Certainly, if you get to where it's got a shroud where it can't see that initial part of the projectile, I think that's an issue. But other than that, I've found it faultless. So I will keep those sort of little tidbits of information as I come. I'm not the place to come and ask how to use it. I'm not the sales point. I don't know enough about what I'm talking about also. But that's what I found. Found it really good, worked really well, and did all the right things for me. Okay, so that's that little fella there. And I think the rest of this, I suppose I should go through and show this one here. We did in the PRC, we found a little bit of, when this rifle was set up with the PRC, 300 PRC barrel in it, I found that I tried to push things a little bit with the PRC to try and make it perform as well as I could. And I found a little bit of overpressuring in the case, which means I had to bring things back down. Normal sort of stuff of pushing your boundaries. But what I did find with this action, this particular long action, this particular Remington 700 action, do have some issues sometimes with leaving the brass behind. You get a tight bolt and it leaves the brass behind, and you've got to put a push rod down the front there and tap it out type thing. Be careful and you won't have any fuss. But what I did to remedy that sort of problem, I saw the same thing when I pushed the boundaries on the rum, is I got this modification done at the end here, which is, I think it's basically referred to as a Seiko extractor modification. I think this is actually an M14 or M16. I've forgotten exactly where it is. Fair bit of work messing around with that to get a proper little extractor in there rather than the way Remington 700 do it. But it turns this into just that bit more flexible sort of action, being able to deal with that slightly tougher bit of brass that's in there. That's that. Okay, so like I said, overall, the going to the 700 rum and going to those speeds, this thing should be a dandy to shoot. Didn't feel heavy on the recoil, and I'm expecting a lot of accuracy in bits and pieces, but we'll see. We'll show that off shortly. I would say for those people who say, oh, it's going to be a barrel burner, listen, here's one of the tricks to go with that. A heavy bullet, even though it's traveling at high speed, the acceleration process is a little slower because what it's doing, maybe that's a little bit to do with it. But the biggest deal is I don't tend to run a lot of rounds. I don't plink with these rifles. They will go and do their test, I'll show off, I'll see how they shoot, I will do any development I need to. Largely, I don't need to do much as long as I've got all the ducks in line with how I prep the brass and that sort of stuff. And then I'll go out and do a shooting course. And maybe I'll do that once a year, but maybe I'll do it twice in that year. But I will tend to be under 250 rounds in 3 years of use. So that's an unfair comparison to people who want to load development, plink and hunt and that sort of stuff and want to run 250 rounds every year. Then okay, you've got a shorter life in your barrel and something that probably will have issues in the 1,000 rounds, maybe 500 rounds, I don't know. All that sort of stuff is so far away from me that it's not been something I bang into. So a barrel burner is only relevant to how hard you're using it. Of course, if you just want to pound away at the range and just one after the other, after the other, after the other, and let the gang have a shoot of it and that sort of stuff and go through 100 rounds at the range because you're playing that day, well, you might see a different result on that day, which I've actually heard happen. But for the way I use them, it's not something I've run into, even on things that I have run many rounds because of the rate we work at, because of the loads we run at, but ultimately because of the amount of overall rounds that we see. Anyway, last bit of this video I wanted to talk about was the muzzle brake on this. I'm looking forward to good things. Let's see if I can get that back a little bit further, put it more in the center of frame. This muzzle brake on here, it's all a little bit different, but the same. It's running a large thread, which I think this was a 7/8 thread on this one here. I haven't measured it probably. Actually, the gunsmith did this for me. Went through and finished this off, and I wanted a gunsmith specifically to go through the process to see what it was going to be like. The reason for that, this muzzle brake is my universal muzzle brake. Here's a gang of what they look like. Now, I do them in 3-port, 4-port, 5-port, and 6-port. So what they actually are, this is the 4-port on here. They are designed with probably what I've found the perfect size aperture on the side in a number of ports, depending on how much recoil retardation you want. More ports, more retardation out of more ports. So right down to something that would work fine on a 308 or a 300 Win Mag with 3 ports, depending on the gun and what you're trying to do. 6.5 Creedmoor even down there. Right up to where you could really run a 416 out of the 6-port because of the amount of braking you've got on this thing. The way I've managed to make them with the smaller the side port, the more refined the blast is out the side there, so the less dust pick up and that type of thing. But the big thing I want to design for is the big heavy spigot here, so you can run them on a full size bull barrel, so a 1 1/4 inch or 31.67 millimeters diameter here, so that as you can see on this full bull barrel it goes straight on. But if you're seeing here, they have just a hole. There's no threads and just a small aperture for the bore as well. These are designed as a semi-finished muzzle brake. The reason they are tapered like this, I do a different muzzle brake that tapers down the front, the big bore and that sort of stuff. These ones are designed where they're square in a way they can pick up on a 4-jaw chuck and then be finished to whatever size you want. And what I mean by that is thread size largely and bore size. It's one of the problems I banged into in selling muzzle brakes and provide muzzle brakes is that the moment, especially when you go into the bigger stuff and the custom stuff, there's always a different thread. That becomes a challenge in multiple ways for try and do here, and that's something that ultimately became impractical to do. You couldn't really cover the cost side of things and not really worth the cost side of things. And ultimately, really, in an engineering process, the best time to do that, cutting that thread, because it is cutting the thread, is when you're cutting the thread in the barrel, or vice versa. It means that you can then buy one of these and get it threaded as this one was done. The barrel was threaded, the bore was threaded, the whole lot was done together. Or you can get one of these that has the weird thread that your rifle came out with. And then you just get your muzzle brake to thread, your gunsmith to thread to that. It meant very simple to do. He felt that it probably took him about an hour of other stuff that was involved in threading this as well as that type thing in the whole process of threading the end of the barrel. An hour extra, so not a major drama on that side of things, and you end up with, well, it feels very good at the moment. It will be showing it off, but it is sort of a little bit of a heads up to everyone that yes, there's a range of fairly low profile from the front, so not too wide, with multiple different levels of ports, even to the level of the way they're set up. You could get the gunsmith to neck this down to as small as your barrel is as well, if you wanted to run one of these muzzle brakes but you only have a 21mm front to the barrel. This is pretty simple to stick in the lathe and machine that down to where it necks down to your barrel as well, because of the design of this muzzle brake. Actually able to be set up. They're just in raw high quality steel, so a 4140 steel, which means they're not stainless steel. They're not made to be just left like this. They're made to where you could do. I have run them like that, where I just keep them weld, but they will rust like this. Even stainless steel will in some environments, but they're not made to. They're made to be finished with Cerakote and that type of thing, but you could run them raw if you wanted to. Anyway, put them to the side. That'd be an overall for this rifle as to where we're at. I'm expecting really good things. Everything's working really well, and I think that sort of explains why I did the rum. I think it should be really good. For those people who don't know, the rum isn't that old actually. Well, not compared to the older of us. I think it was 2000 is when the 7mm rum showed up. So still, a fairly new kid on the block in the big scheme of things. But I look forward to it, and performance-wise, it's about what it is. I would say it's not quite as efficient as the 28 Nosler powder versus bang, but it's not far off it. And for my stuff, it's the big dog of the 7mm. So really looking forward to getting it out and getting on steel at 3000 and beyond. But yeah, that's all to come. We'll see how it all goes. Anyway, guys, that's my talk for today. I hope you like what we've put together. Thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.